minute, actually, I will ask, has anybody taken one of these assessment tests at some point in their career? Thomas-Kilman is the most famous. There's a Myers-Briggs one. There's the on negotiation at Harvard. Yes, John says yes. John, which one have you taken?
I took the Myers-Briggs.
Okay.
And, I've taken some other things on conflict resolution, but,
And you find that's helpful in your line of work?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm not at your level by any means, but it is helpful to get any type of insight. And sometimes when you're in a difficult situation, to maybe fly up to 50,000 feet and really look at what's going on here. Why are you, I used to have an old coach that when we'd be in a close game, he'd say, you're in a pissing fight with the skunk, and, sometimes I think in business, we get in pissing fights with skunks, pardon my language, but, that's when you kind of got to realize about resolving things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a great analogy. I mean, some people say you cut off your nose to spite your face. It's like you're basically poking a bear because you feel like poking a bear. And while you're poking a bear, your whole job is going off schedule. So, I'm sure also in people who have customer facing people and internally working people, you kind of want to make sure those people are in the right positions and they're learning to do the crossing over when they need to be doing the crossing over. So the Thomas-Kilman is the one that I'm most proficient with. And so there are 5 modes. So competing, compromising, avoiding, collaborating, and accommodating. So I'm going to ask for a little audience participation. I wrote down a couple of names and not for any particular reason other than I just wrote them down. And so I'm going to have you read the slides as we go along. So Joel, would you please read this slide?
Competing, assertive and uncooperative. You try to satisfy your own concerns at your teammates' expense.
Thank you. All right, and so while that may sound kind of harsh, this can be used and is used quite a bit when a decision has to be made. There is no room for argument. So if you think of your child playing in the street, okay, so you're going to use a competing style of conflict because you need something done fast or immediate detriment will happen. So always a time and a place for each of these. So John, will you read this one?
Sure. Collaborating, assertive and cooperative. You try to find a win-win solution that completely satisfies both your concerns and your teammates' concerns.
Great. Collaborative is something that people do strive for, especially on teams that are going to be very creative. You think of like building a space shuttle, something that's going to take a long time, cost gazillion dollars, and the designs and the creativity is very important for people to collaborate. You do need a lot of time for collaboration, and I always joke you also need lots of Post-it notes. So when you see a team and they're in like a room in a think tank in a bubble, and they've got the Post-it notes all over the walls, and they're ordering in Chinese or whatever, that's a collaboration exercise that's probably happening. And I do bring up this space shuttle, the Challenger explosion. That was the situation. I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but I want to wrap it together. That was an avoiding situation where some people were very encouraged. They were encouraged not to bring up problems with the design. They were on a tight budget, a tight schedule, and they ended up sweeping a few things under the rug because the personality styles and the fostering of the teamwork on that team was not conducive for them to actually bring up things that they felt they had issues with. All right. Angelique, will you read the next one?
Is she here?
Oh, I don't know. Let me pick another person then. Olia, will you read this one?
Hi, Daya.
Hi.
I finally got my video to work, sorry. So compromising, intermediate in both assertiveness and cooperativeness. You try to find an acceptable settlement that only partially satisfies your concerns and those of your teammate.
Yes. So this is the proverbial splitting the baby or splitting the difference, and this is something that we see a lot in the legal world. You also see it a lot in your relationships, your spouse, your significant other, your roommate, if you have a roommate. This is something that you just want to reach an agreement and move on. And so this would be used when the stakes aren't terribly high in the like personal relationship situation, or if you were in a work situation, it would be something that you would negotiate back and forth with or without a third party until you reach something that's okay for both of you. Denise, will you read this one?
Avoiding, unassertive and uncooperative. You sidestep the conflict without trying to satisfy your concerns or those of your teammate.
And this is the one that's actually used most in the workforce. This is where people just kind of let it go. I see Kevin shaking his head, a fellow coach in this area. Is pretty much what happens. It's like 48% of leaders and managers will completely avoid conflict. And that's from a Harvard Business Review study. So it's weird. I mean, you think leader, you think manager, you're like, okay, they've got this completely under control, but rather they not. They don't want to ruffle feathers or upset any of their teammates. And when you avoid something, it is doomed to grow and repeat itself. And though there is a time though to avoid it when you're in like the heat of it. So when you're in the heat of an argument or something going awry, it may be advisable to say, okay, I'm going to take 10 minutes and think about this, or I'm going to get all the information before I start swaying this conversation.
What are the telltale signs of identifying somebody who wants to engage in avoidance? Are there any big things to be on the look for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much they don't bring up their opinions on anything. They're sort of the silent but deadly people. And you'll want to like engage conversation with your team as much as possible. Otherwise, these will be the people that just kind of let things go off the rails. And then one day they don't come to work and you have a resignation letter. So, and it'll have a million things on there about why this was a crappy place to work and how they never got heard or never felt they were heard. They didn't really bring themselves into the conversation. They would rather avoid it. And they probably have some gold. They probably have some really great ideas in there. It's just not their personality. And that's why fostering teamwork and fostering trainings like this are a plus for an organization. One more. Tom, will you read this one? If Tom is still here. Where'd Tom go? There you are.
No, I'm here. Accommodating, unassertive and cooperative, your attempt to satisfy your teammates' concern at the expense of your own. Isn't that the same one we just went through?
No. Let's see. Oh, wrong way. Okay, I was going to go back and now I'm not going back. How do I do this? There we go. Sorry, using Google Slides today instead of what I usually use. So avoiding is when you are unassertive and you're not participating. I've taken my toys out of the sandbox and I'm going to let you guys fight over the other toys and see what's happening. So accommodating is when you're unassertive and you're kind of like a doormat. I call accommodating the doormat. And I have a really good clip in my longer presentation. There's a movie with, I think it's Ben Stiller and Jennifer Aniston called Along Comes Polly or something like that, Along Comes Polly. And she takes him to some Middle Eastern restaurant and he's eating these spices. Like his character is like very bland, very risk adverse. I think he's like a adjuster or an actuary type person, like very, very vanilla guy. And she's this wild, exotic person who he's going to go on a date with. And so he's miserable. He is eating this food and his face is blood red and he's just sweating profusely. And she's like, "Are you okay?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, I love ethnic food." And like, this is obviously a major problem for him. So he is accommodating, like he is completely shooting his physical system to heck and back because she's let's go do this. And he's like, sure, I love it. So does that make sense? So it's not avoiding it. It's basically like shooting yourself in the foot. Right. All right. So leaders, again, they avoid. There we go. Okay. So ding, ding. There. Okay. So you can lead conflict without stepping into the conflict. And that's something that I encourage through my trainings, leaders to intentionally practice. So there is a thing called conflict coaching. So I also do business and leadership coaching, like Kevin was talking about earlier. And I do a lot of work with lawyers and law firms since my background is in law. But I do have a case study from some conflict coaching that I did. And I'll just do the highlights of it again. This was a European company, and it was a 3-member management team. And Jackie was part of this management team, and she was disagreeing about an employee named Ryan being let go. So there were like 2 parts. So she disagreed with this, and she disagreed with her partners, her management team making this decision without her. So she was pretty accommodating and pretty avoiding as a leader. So basically, we had a very short amount of time to work together. But what we did was we bolstered her ability to communicate with her other managers, while we also did some work with Ryan so that he left the company with great marks, and they actually placed him with one of their vendors. So he became, and what could have happened is to have more work done with the both of them. But this was one of the things that they just chose to do in this situation. So Jackie became more integral in the role, spoke up more. She was avoiding, so not really until she had a complaint with something. So this was like the catalyst for her to say, hey, you know what, he could have been a better employee if we worked with him, and I want to have the strength to start saying these things. So that's a very, very, very short case study. And the ways that you can use conflict coaching in the workplace: you can coach the people who are at odds if they're willing to be coached. You can coach the project leaders. And in that case, that's what I was doing. I was coaching Jackie. Or you can have coach training coming in as an activity. So again, I do day-long, half-day, and hour-long program with this similar material. And with that, I would normally put everybody in a breakout group, and we would do some activities. And today we don't have time. So the idea of doing the activities is to actually engage in healthy conflict, to practice skills of dialogue, and to build consensus. And that's that. So I want to have a follow-up conversation with everybody, because I hope I've made you just curious enough to say, hey, I want to look more into this for myself or my company or my clients. And there's my calendar link. It is also in the chat. So I will stop screen sharing, and we'll come back to conversation.
That was awesome. I definitely recommend a one-to-one with Daya. It's she can definitely point you in the right direction with a lot of things that we all come up with in business, and that's conflict from time to time. You know, you got to resolve it well. I have a question.
Sooner the better.
I know you listed kind of a bibliography. Do you have one book or item that you recommend is above all others? Is read this?
I think Getting to Yes is kind of the textbook for this type of work. That's a pretty easy, quick paperback read. So I think that would be the best one for right now. There's also a book that's really popular right now, which is called Don't Split the Difference. And it's a pretty good book. It's a pretty good book as well. He takes a kind of hardline approach on some things, and yeah. Some people have said he's a little full of himself, so I won't say that. I'll just say other people said that.
How would you rank Crucial Conversations in that?
Excellent one. Thank you. Yes, that's a good one. Yes, if you want to get into a deeper dive and some more philosophical and as well as practical implementation. Yes. But I do recommend taking an assessment, either the Thomas-Kilman, one of the Myers-Briggs ones. DISC has one as well. Um, and I think in our out networking, we all know somebody who administers those tests. So I can hook you up with a Thomas-Kilman if you want. So
How
So,
about conflict resolution with clients? I mean, there's one thing about working with a team of people, but does it come into play with customers and clients as well? Can you learn those things?
yes. Yes. So this is a pretty high overview of just kind of recognizing things and yes, dealing with customers and clients, if you can kind of see where they're going and what their patterns are, like you can learn how to kind of offset it. So you don't want to be like the same, you don't want to be on the same side, and you don't want to be exactly opposite. So if you can kind of move into an area that would be more complementary or engage in more communication. And then I also say since I do have legal background, I also say sometimes with an employee or a team member, it may be time for them to go. You can't fix every situation, and you do need to assess what's best for your company. Yeah. So yeah, you might need an official mediation situation. They might need to be separated from the company or the team, just the way it goes.
well, Daya, this is all Gordon. I'm sorry I was late. I was busy. I got called down to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue to try to resolve some conflicts down there.
Okay.
Sorry to say that I failed.
Mhm.
And I tried, but I failed. I even tried one of my famous Gordon classics, which is Tar and Feather. And I got to tell you, my Tar and Feather classic usually works whenever I have conflict with someone. Just ask Kurt, because he used to have a full head of hair.
Yes, with Sal, I definitely feel like the doormat sometimes in your example.
And I also use the rules that I have behind me.
I see that.
Those are the official rules in Singapore, the Singapore Club.
Mm-hmm. Singapore has a lot of rules. And amazing food. And amazing food. I got to say that's one of my favorite places to eat.
Yeah.
Is Singapore. So great. Yes. So again, please.
I have a question for you.
Oh, sure.
So what would you determine would be some of the most identifying aspects when you're working with someone who is uncoachable and will create conflicting situations? Mm-hmm. Is there something in your trainings that would give you a idea of that's what you're working with, of someone who's not going to be coachable, even though they may have been avoiding or even compromising at other times, but what you're realizing is that they're uncoachable and they're not willing to change?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When it comes to that situation, you do have to sometimes make a really strong stand about it. And I'm assuming this is someone who's under your management as opposed to a peer. Okay. So yes. Yes. I mean, I'm all for working with his people as much as possible to see if they're going to be in the right role and in the right team dynamic. And just like a breakup, sometimes it's not going to work out in the long run. You can go to as much counseling as you want, but you're just not a good fit. And they may be perfect for another role in another company. Mm-hmm. So like Ryan, the one where my client's employee was placed in another company and he did great. Mm-hmm. So it was just not the right fit. Over time, I think when Jackie and I were working on it, I think over time, yes, he could have come and brought more to the team that he was in, and that would have been fine as well. But her her peers had already said, no, this is how we're going to handle this. So, yeah.
Daya, how do you say your name first off?
Daya is the most common,
Daya? Okay.
but Daya is phonetically correct. So I guess I'm avoidant on that.
Well, I'm never correct, but that's besides the point.
Okay.
Most important, unless you might have already said it. How do you make money?
How do I make?
How much do you charge?
Okay, well, I have to get into a needs assessment with you and your organization before I can actually quote something. But usually for an organization, it's some sort of package of what we would need. Individual is hourly. So yeah, and it just depends on what kind of things we would need and how long we would need to be working together.
Excuse me, Daya.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I have to buzz out of here.
Okay.
I hate to, but I have to leave. So thank you.
Great. Thank you for being here.
Great. And hopefully I can have a one-on-one with you.
Please.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. And take care. See you next time.
Tony, it was a pleasure seeing you.
Likewise.
And Tony likes you not to avoid other vehicles. And
I have to bolt.
we can bring him some business.
Well,
right.
We are at 5 o'clock now, and the meeting goes 4 to 5. But I did want to ask Daya one last question. Do you have any thoughts on arbitration? Any concrete thoughts on arbitration clauses and their use, and when not, and that type of thing?
Are we still recording? This might be an off the record conversation.
Yes, we are recording, but I can turn it off.
I definitely want a copy of the recording from my talk because I'm always refining it. Yes and no. I am myself an arbitrator as well as a mediator, and trained in both of those things. I have a little bit of an issue with the blanket arbitration clauses. I encourage, when I was practicing law, I encouraged my clients to put mediation clauses in. And then choose the home jurisdiction. Of course, that's when I would be litigating for them. So I would want to be in my own home jurisdiction, as opposed to being in an arbitration. Arbitrations can be very expensive and they're non-appealable. But this is not to be considered legal advice in any way, shape, or form. It's just kind of what I've found. And then again, I am an arbitrator, so I can't exactly say don't do it or whatever, but it got to be an industry standard. AAA, the American Arbitration Association, got in with some trades very early on and got it put in the standard documents, the American Institute of Architects documents. It was standard. All FINRA cases, so all securities and investment related cases, even if it's just between the broker and his employee, his or her employee, like those cases all have to go to FINRA arbitration. So it's certain industries that have done that. And I encourage people to resolve disputes early and talk things through with communication as much as possible before going into any kind of legal maneuver, because it gets costly and it draws things out.
All right, let's give Daya a nice little round of applause. Thank you very much. Great job.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
All right, and